prepared I've been, in the sense that I've got about 3 things ready, and not sure which one the Lord wanted me to go to. But what a friend we have in Jesus. We just sang page number 161. What a friend we have in Jesus. And so I think that's what we're going to look at. Genesis chapter 18. I wanted to start maybe a little series, a little set of lessons maybe on prayer. And so I've been looking at some different things. And Genesis 18 was one of them. What a friend we have in Jesus. And he says, all our burdens to him we can take. What peace we often forfeit, or what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. The end of the second verse, Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there. And so I think we've kind of lost, maybe as Christianity as a whole, and we've said this before, is just the understanding of prayer and the desire maybe to spend more time in prayer. And maybe we do spend some time in prayer, but maybe not with the power that we could have if we understood it maybe a little bit better. And so that's kind of my heart, is that I pray a lot, but I also feel like my prayer life is not what it could be, and I would like it to be more. And I would like to see more of God's power in my prayer life. And at the same time, I would say, man, God's been so awesome. He has answered prayer. He has been faithful. But it's like plugging into that outlet and getting straight from the source. And the better connection we have, the more we get the answers. The more in tune we are with God, I believe. And whether he answers it the way we ask or not, when we're in tune with him, it doesn't matter the answer, because we understand he knows what's best. And so I think we're going to start tonight with Abraham. Genesis 18, let's start reading here in verse number 16, and then we'll kind of come back maybe to the first part of the chapter and just kind of grasp what's going on. And then we're going to talk about conversing with God. And so Genesis 18, starting verse number 16, the Bible says, and the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence, and went towards Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near, and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy, not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. And he spake unto him yet again, and said, peradventure there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Peradventure there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, O Lord, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communion with Abraham. and Abraham returned unto his place. And so, really, in verse number 33, that word communing, it kind of caught my attention. The fact that God and Abraham were communing. And so, our conversing or our communing with God in prayer is what we want to look at tonight. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the evening. Lord, it's been a blessing. And the different songs we sang at Calvary, Lord, a reminder of who we are in and of ourselves. Lord, we were lost and in sin and without hope, and didn't even realize it until someone shared the gospel with us, until we ran into you and realized what you had done for us, Lord. And we're so thankful that you loved us the way you did, that you would leave heaven's glory and die on that cross for us, Lord, even when we didn't realize we needed it. And Lord, now that we're in a relationship with you and we know you as our Savior, we look back and we give all glory to you, and we say at Calvary, it changed everything in our lives. And Lord, now we simply want to draw closer to you. We want to know more about you. We want to be more in love with you. We want to love you more, just understand you more, and to be more like you. And I pray, Lord, that this message, maybe this lesson, would be an encouragement to us. It would help us in that direction, Lord, as we begin maybe looking at the thought of prayer, what it is and how it is. Lord, that you would just help us over the next few weeks to draw closer to you, to have a greater prayer life, to have more power in our prayer, and to see you answer more prayers. Lord, we love you and we give you the honor and glory for it all. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So first I want to just look back at verse number 16, and he says, the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? And so we first see that God initiates this conversation. God has come down to Abraham, and if we looked in the first part of this chapter, he's come to Abraham in the plains of Mamre. It says, verse 1, Abraham lifts up his eyes, he sees three men. He looks out across there, and he realizes that it is God. He says in verse number 3, my Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Notice in verse 2 that he ran to these three men and he bowed himself toward the ground. There's no discerning between the three. He bows himself before the three men. And I believe that it's the three parts of the Trinity there, because none of them tell him to get up. None of them refuse the worship. They all allow him to bow before them and to begin to worship. And so throughout this conversation, he simply says, my Lord. He uses singular, my Lord, speaking to these three men. And then he says, allow me to fetch some water for you. Allow me to fetch some morsel of bread, verses 4 and 5. Verse number 6, Abraham hasted into the tent unto Sarah and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto the young man, and he hasted to dress it. He took the butter and milk and the calf which he dressed, to set it before them. He stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. Sarah heard it in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, also, being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? And I just wrote to the side, no, nothing. At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, nay, but thou didst laugh. And so prior to this is the kind of story. God comes down and Abraham meets with them. Abraham provides drink and food for them. He's treating them with hospitality. But the fact that it is the Lord, and we see that in the singular, the way he speaks to Abraham, and Abraham speaks to him. And so then it says there, verse number 16, the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham? So, again, a long introduction, but God initiates this conversation. God asks the question, shall I hide this from Abraham? And so just a few things. Letter A, I said there's a desire for Abraham to know his will, verse number 17. God says, and the Lord, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? God knows what he's going to do. God knows what's happening in Sodom and Gomorrah, and God's on his way there to check it out and to see it for himself but God wants Abraham to know his will and to what's going on. And so I believe in there is we kind of see throughout this first part of the chapter that God comes to Abraham to reveal his will, to reveal that Sarah's going to have a son, and to ultimately bring to pass the promise that God made to Abraham back in chapter 12. But here we see very specifically, and in verse number 23, we'll see where Abraham begins this prayer, this conversation, this conversing with God on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. But the fact that God initiated that. And so with all of us in our lives, wouldn't you agree that God initiated with us? We were lost, as we sang at Calvary. We were lost and without hope. We were in sin, probably clueless. If we had a good job and we had a good career and we were making money, we were happy. If we had a family that was healthy, we were happy. We didn't understand we had a need. And then somebody came and shared with us the gospel. You're a sinner in need of a Savior. The Bible says if you die without Christ, you're going to go to hell. What? Me? I got a good job. I'm paying the bills. I got a nice house. I got everything that the world says you should have. I got a family. They're all doing well. Whatever it might have been our case, but we didn't realize that. But God said somebody to cross our path that allowed us to realize we had a need. And through the scriptures, faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So in this same sense is that God is revealing himself. God begins the conversation, and God will begin conversation with us as well. When we're in tune with him, and God's beginning to work, and God's doing things, God will work in our hearts to prepare us for what he has to come. And that's, I believe, what we see in verse number 16 and 17. When the men rose up to go to Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham went with them to bring them on their way. He's simply walking with God. He's walking with God in the way, taking them on the direction to Sodom and Gomorrah. I believe little did Abraham know what God was about to reveal to him. But the fact of the matter is that when we're walking with God, when we're in tune with God, when we're in step with God, he reveals things to us. Verse number 17, the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him." If you go back to Genesis chapter 12, that was God's promise to Abraham. And so let her be, I believe that God has a plan for Abraham. This was previously revealed. We see it here in verse 18 that God basically restates it. But chapter 12 is God giving this plan, or revealing this plan, that I will make a great nation of you. That he's going to give him a son. And that he will bless him as the sand of the sea and as the stars in the sky. The nations that bless him, God will bless. The nations that curse him, God will curse. And so God has a plan that has been previously revealed. And then let her see, God knows Abraham's heart. And look at verse number 19. "For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him." And so again, the fact that God knows Abraham's heart, God knows who Abraham is, God knows how Abraham will react to things, and he knows Abraham's heart and his desires. And we said with David, God knew that David was a man after his own heart. Did David have sin in his heart in his life at times? Yes. Did David mess up big time at times? Yes. But ultimately, God knew instead, he's a man after my own heart. And so God here knows Abraham. Did Abraham make mistakes? Yes. But God knew who Abraham was, and God knew who Abraham and his desires, the desire of his heart. He says, "Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation." Who's going to do that? God. Abraham really doesn't have play a part in it other than being faithful, other than submitting to God's will, other than yielding and allowing God to use him. God's going to do the work. God's going to make him a great and mighty nation. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Again, God's going to do that. That's not going to be Abraham that makes that and makes that promise. God has done that. And the fact of the matter is here too in verse number 18, Abraham has no son yet. Abraham won't have a son for a long time, but God is again reaffirming the promise that he already made to him in chapter 12. And then he says, "I know him." God knows his people. God, and that word "know" is an intimate knowledge. The fact that God knows, he understands, he knows everything about him. I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him. And so we know the Bible says that Abraham was a righteous man. He believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. And so God is saying that What Abraham will do, he'll follow me, he'll yield to me, he'll walk in my steps, and he'll bring his family, his children, in the same way. His household after him. They shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice. And the word justice is simply to do right, to do what's right, to make right decisions, based sometimes on the information you have. You may have some limited information, but you'll make a right decision. And a man after God's own heart doesn't make hasty decisions. When he has limited information, he's going to seek out and search out the rest of the information to make a godly decision. And unfortunately, sometimes we get wrapped up in a world that's in a hurry, and we try to make hasty decisions, and when we do, a lot of times we get ourselves into trouble. What God's saying with Abraham, Abraham won't make a hasty decision on limited information. Abraham will gather the facts. Abraham will do his best to be able to discern between what's right and wrong. And he'll do justice. He'll do what's right. And when he has the facts, he'll do what's right. And judgment. This is to think right. That's the discerning side of things. To take things in and to hear both sides of the story. And I can't tell you as well how many times I've went maybe on a call and you hear one side of the story, and in your mind, I'm going over here and this is what I'm going to do based on what I know. Then I come over here and you hear the other side and you're like, they just lied to me. Or with the rest of the facts, I would have been foolish to do what I thought I was going to do because now I have the rest of the facts. And knowing both sides of the story, that wasn't completely true. And in life, this is what we say. You have one story, a second story, and somewhere in between is the truth. So the idea is that we have justice, that I'm going to do right, that I'm going to look for the facts, I'm going to try to gather the facts, and then when I know them, I'm going to be discerning, I'm going to use judgment, I'm going to do what's right. And he says that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. Ultimately, again, when we do things right, and when we use justice and judgment, and when we're following the Lord, He'll do these things. He will bring to pass the things He's promised. We'll still be in the path where God can bless us and can use us. Again, a lot of men that have got off the path, have chased sin, have made decisions in their life that completely ruin their opportunity for ministry. It takes them out of ministry. They lose opportunity to have a ministry. And God's saying with Abraham that He will use justice and judgment, and that the Lord may bring Abraham to that which He has spoken of him. That He'll be able to use Abraham and bring that to pass. Verse number 20, the Lord begins to reveal this. The Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which has come unto me, and if not, I will know. How many men, or how many people, let's say that, how many people did Abraham finally dwindle it down to with God? 10 people. So was there a lot of righteous people in Sodom crying out to God for righteousness? No. So a couple of things we see there is that God is a righteous and holy God, and that a very small number of people can cry out for righteousness, right? A small amount of people God will change His plans. And maybe not change, but God will be righteous. He's not going to destroy the righteous with the sinful. He's not going to destroy the city He promises Abraham if there's 10 righteous people. So what it reminds us or makes us think is that God, for a small amount of people, will kind of work based on those people. Does that make sense? There doesn't have to be a huge crowd. It doesn't have to be the majority to get God to be on our side. It would have been 10 simple people in Sodom that God would have changed things for. And so the other side of it is that I don't believe that there was a great number. I don't believe He couldn't find 10 people. So what is crying out in Sodom and Gomorrah? I don't believe it's the righteous people. I believe that they had grown so accustomed to what was going on in Sodom. They were so inundated with the sin and the lifestyle. Look at Lot himself. His own wife refused to go. God, the angel, had to take Lot and his wife by the hands and his daughters and pull them out, right? And he says, I want you to go to the mountain. And they say, well, can't we stay here in the plain? Okay, if that's where you want to go there. That wasn't even good enough. What's she do? Turns and becomes a pillar of salt. And so in that, I believe they just got so inundated, they've got so engrossed in the lifestyle, they've become so numb to it that they don't even realize it. So it's not the righteous people. It is sin itself, I think. You see there, he says, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great. That's just the sin and the horribleness, the wickedness of the place. And because their sin is very grievous. And so when God looks on sin, he can't stand it, right? He hates it. It caused him to send his son to die for it. And he's saying here, the sin of the people, the sin of this city is so great, it's absolutely horrid. And now even the righteous people, which we can look back at 2 Peter, and he says that Lot is just Lot, right? He's justified. Yet he's living there. His desire is to be further in. We see that he turns his tent towards Sodom. The next thing you know, he's sitting in the gates. He became a man of the city. And so the sin of the city is so great, it's grievous. And I believe that's what's crying out to God. Just the horrible amount of sin, the lifestyle, and the fact that even the righteous aren't concerned or aren't turned away from that. And so we see that God knows Abraham. We know he sees his heart. He knows Abraham's heart. And he knows, based on this, notice again, verse 19, for I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous. And so, again, letter C, I guess, is that God knows Abraham's heart, and God knows that a righteous man seeking after a righteous and holy God is going to make righteous, holy decisions. Sin is going to bother him. And when God comes to Abraham, and we'll see here in a few minutes in the next verses, that God begins to reveal what is going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, and what's Abraham's heart. But there might be 50 righteous there. God, please don't destroy them with the rest. Well, maybe there's 45. And so the righteous man's heart is that he cries out. He has a burden for the lost souls that are there, and that may be destroyed with the rest of them. And then verse number 21, I'm kind of jumping around. Number 2, let me stay with my notes. Abraham is comfortable speaking his heart to God. So number 1, God initiates the conversation. God has a desire for Abraham to know his will. God has a plan for Abraham, and God knows Abraham's heart. Number 2, Abraham is comfortable speaking his heart to God. Notice that he drew near, verse number 23. Abraham drew near. So Abraham begins on the way with these men. He begins to walk them towards Sodom and Gomorrah. God begins this conversation. God begins to converse with Abraham. And he says, here's what I'm going to do, and here's the reasons why. Notice verse 23, Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure, we might say perhaps, there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? And so, I believe there, first of all, that Abraham drew near, and this might correspond with our physical position. If I wanted to speak with Mr. Playboy, I'm most likely not going to say, hey, Mr. Playboy, across the room, are you going to come Friday night? And maybe the circumstances would dictate that. But most likely what I'm going to do is draw near to Mr. Playboy and begin a conversation on our own. Hey, what are we going to do Friday night? Do you want to bring something to cook, right? Then we'll play some volleyball. When it gets dark, we'll put everything away. Most likely when we converse with somebody, what do? We draw near. Well, the same thing with God. Abraham draws near to God. And I believe that has to do with our physical positioning. Okay? Now, if I'm in a place like this, and I might yell across the room to Mr. Pueblo, or if I wanted one of the boys in the back to do something, I might holler out to them in the back of the room. But if we wanted to have a private conversation, we're going to draw near. Now, if I'm driving in the car, 70 miles an hour on I-4, I'm going to close my eyes and bow and no. So my environment, right, the timing may dictate my positioning. So in the car, I might sit there and be conversing with God in my mind. I may talk out loud to him if nobody else is in the car with me, or people driving by looking at me, what's that crazy guy doing? But if I'm at home in my prayer closet, my positioning is going to be different, right? When I draw nigh to God, I'm probably going to be on my knees to God. Okay? So my environment might dictate my positioning. But the fact of the matter is, in all of it, I'm going to draw nigh to God. Okay? So that's letter A. Letter B is the fact that Abraham, in feeling comfortable speaking to God, he questions maybe God's justice. And he says there, wilt thou also, verse 23, destroy the righteous with the wicked? And And I don't think that Abraham actually thought that God would destroy the righteous with him, but when God says, I'm going to wipe out Sodom, and Abraham just thinking total annihilation of the city, but there might be some righteous people down there, God. Peradventure there be 50 within the city. Wilt thou also destroy, not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are there? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked. You think Abraham knew God? And that he was a righteous God, and that he was a just God, and that he would do justice? So we see God telling or saying of Abraham that he will be just and that he will do justice. He'll teach his kids to be just and to think justice. And now Abraham's saying the same thing about God. There's an intimate knowledge. They know one another. Okay? And in our prayer lives, if we're going to know God and we're going to be in tune with God, we need to know him. All right? He says, that be far from thee, verse 25, to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. And notice, he says, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And what's the only answer? Yes, absolutely. The righteous judge of all the earth will always do right. And so, again, is our heart coming into tune with the righteous God? Our heart knowing God, knowing how he works, knowing Scripture well enough to say, God wouldn't destroy the righteous with the wicked. Okay? And there may be times we come into trouble. We know Daniel was in captivity. The Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were in captivity. The nation had sinned. Life may not always seem pretty and easy, but God's not just going to flat out wipe out the righteous with the wicked. All right. Verse number 26, God continues. He tells them, the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. So again, think with me, Christian, is that we might live in a little community and we are bombarded by the news and the crime and everything that's going on around us. But understand, if there was 50 righteous people here, it would have made a big difference for the city of Sodom. If there's 50 righteous people in OCOEE, it could make a difference whether God destroys a city or saves it. But again, don't allow us to become a lot where we're just become accustomed to it. We ought to be crying out for the sin of our city and doing what we can to make a difference in it. All right. So we see that he understands, he questions God, maybe his justice. He makes multiple requests, and time's flying by. Verses 22 through 32, we see multiple requests where Abraham says, what if there's 50? Well, perhaps there's 45, perhaps 30. So he starts small, let's drop 5, let's drop, and he begins dropping 10 at a time until he gets to 10. So he makes multiple requests. But at the same time, we see that in verse 27, 30 and 32, that Abraham has a proper perspective of who he is. Notice quickly verse 27. He says there, Abraham answered and said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Right? We will return from dust we were made, and to dust we'll return. He says, I'm dust and ashes. It's just ashes, what's reduced in a fire, right? Everything in a fire that burns up is simply reduced to nothing but ashes. And so Abraham says, I'm nothing but dust and ashes. God, that you would listen to me. Right? And as we pray each Wednesday night, that thought comes to mind, Hebrews 4:16, that we can come boldly before the throne of grace. And yet we would say, God, I'm nothing but dust and ashes. I'm a miserable heap of dirt. But I'm so thankful that you'll listen to me, and that I can come into your presence with boldness and ask for grace to help me in my time of need. Notice again, verse 30, he says there, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. So again, a humble spirit that yes, the God of the universe has a right to be angry at someone questioning him, but at the same time, a father-son relationship, a child of God, God says, talk to me, right? He that lacks wisdom, James 1 says, he that lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not. The fact that God will give it to you, he's not going to cut you down, he's not going to scorn you, he's not going to give you a hard time. And the same thing here. Don't be angry with me in the sense that I know he's not, but at the same time, I want you to know I'm humble and I'm making a simple request. And we see that in verse 30 and 32. And then letter D, he has that, already hit D. Okay. So that's the 4 there. He drew near. He has to do with his physical positioning. He questions God, maybe in his justice, multiple requests, and then the proper perspective. Number 3, the relationship that they enjoy, I believe, is a personal relationship. We notice that they're conversing back and forth. God says he's going to reveal this stuff to Abraham. And verse 23, Abraham draws nigh to the Lord. He begins to ask, and they're talking back and forth. Will you destroy it? No, I won't. How about for 45? No, I won't. How about 30, right? Back and forth conversing. Verse number 33, the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham. Abraham returned unto his place. And the fact that communing takes two people, and they're talking back and forth. They have ongoing conversation. So it was a personal conversation. It was open. God sharing with his will and desire with Abraham. God sharing heart to heart with Abraham what he's going to do. And then Abraham sharing back with God what his desire was for the righteous people and for the sake of the righteous. And then it was honest conversation. God knew Abraham. Abraham knew God. It was a mutual relationship. There was respect there. God knew. God knows that man is but dust, right? He says it in the Psalm. He knows that man is but dust, and that the simplest blink of God could wipe out each and every one of us. And yet he pays attention to us, and he says, I'm a God of grace and mercy. And then, and we need to realize who God is. And then lastly, number 4, he's afforded opportunity. Notice in verse 33, it says, when the Lord went his way, as soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. God gave him opportunity to speak. God allowed this conversation to take place. Abraham had plenty of opportunity. The word communing, it means mutual conversation, a sharing of the heart and desires, and it's to share one's intimate thoughts or feelings with someone else. And so God desires that of us. And we've said it before, last week or 2 weeks ago in Psalm 143, as it opened, that David's sharing his heart. David doesn't just pray in generalities. David prays, my enemies are coming after me. God, I need your help. I feel like I'm at the end of my rope, but I want to win the victory. I don't want my enemies to have victory. I want you to receive the honor and glory. He's praying very specifically, and I believe that's what Abraham's saying to God here too. God, what about the 50 righteous? Well, perhaps there's only 45. And the conversation goes back and forth, where Abraham is being very specific with God. He's giving God specific numbers. And I don't believe that it was when he finally said 10 and God said, all right, Abraham, shut up, you're done, right? I believe it was ongoing conversation, and Abraham finally said, well, all right, I think 10 is probably the number. There's got to be 10 there. All right, God, if there's 10, God says, sure, if there's 10, I'll spare it. And he said, okay. All right, and they ended their conversation. Now, when David says, when he had left communing with Abraham, Abraham returned unto his place. And so, hopefully it's a help. I don't know. Conversing with God, Abraham, Genesis 18, 16 through 33. Maybe you can read through it again. And just allow it to come into your mind what's going on. The fact that God of the universe, the God that's ready to just, with a sweep of the hand, wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah. The God that can say, don't look back, or I'm going to turn you to a pillar of salt. And when the lady does it, boom, it happens. That same God will sit and converse with a righteous man, knowing his heart and allowing him to speak back and forth, heart to heart. And what an awesome opportunity you and I have. And when God says, amen. God says you can humbly, boldly come before the throne of grace, understand, right? Whether it's our needs, maybe we're crying out for our own community. But until we get burdened for the people, as Abraham, I believe, was burdened for the people of Sodom, maybe we would become that intercessor for our community when we realize what a mess they're in, that they need a Savior, and we may be the one thing that's standing between God's judgment and wiping out the community, because we're the 50 righteous, or perhaps the 10 righteous. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the day.